Most tragedies don't begin with an explosion. They start with something small, quiet, almost unnoticeable. A cold breeze passing by. A tiny shift in the air that no one pays attention to. And for this family, everything began with that same quiet unease. Subtle, creeping, yet heavy enough to make their hearts sink. That morning should have been peaceful, just like every morning before it. But when her family called and she didn't answer, they knew something felt off. She was the type who always replied fast, even if it was just a short message. But that day, her phone stayed silent. A silence so long and dense that everyone started looking at each other with worried eyes. Then they noticed her routines had suddenly vanished. She never showed up to her yoga class, the same class she went to every week, always arriving 10 minutes early, always greeting everyone with her familiar smile. She didn't post anything on social media either, even though she usually shared a morning coffee picture or a gentle quote to start the day. Everything was eerily quiet, as if her world had suddenly switched off. One close friend kept calling over and over. She said something didn't feel right, not because she was overthinking, but because of a gut instinct only someone who knows your heartbeat can truly sense. When a woman who's always strong, always organized, suddenly disappears from every part of her routine, it's no longer tardiness. It's a warning. The family started tracing every clue they could find. Each step, each door they opened, didn't bring answers, only more questions. Her home looked untouched, with no signs of struggle. Her phone was left on the table, as if she had rushed out. But her wallet and keys were gone. The contradiction made everyone's skin crawl. Her mother stood in the familiar bedroom, eyes lingering on the sweater her daughter always wore on chilly days. She whispered that something was wrong. A sacred intuition only a mother could understand. She knew her daughter would never leave without a word, never disappear into silence like this. Neighbors reported hearing a sound the night before, not loud, not like a fight, just something. A disturbance in the dark, a faint, uneasy noise that stayed in their memory. All these small details, when placed together, formed the blurry outline of something abnormal. No one knew what was happening, but they felt it. Free pleas of now impossible. Free pleas of now impossible. Like standing in front of a storm, where the wind hasn't picked up yet, but the air already smells like danger. And then, in that confusion, the family realized this unease wasn't passing. This was the moment when they had to face the greatest fear of their lives. A fear waiting at the end of a road they weren't ready to walk down. The first hours after she vanished felt like a slow-motion film. Every second, every tiny detail suddenly became a crucial clue. And strangely, the last moments people saw her carried far more emotion than anyone realized at the time. Moments that would later make them wonder, did they miss something? A signal? A glance? A quiet plea for help? Witnesses said she had left a small gathering the night before. Just coffee with a friend, something simple to shake off a long week. No one imagined that would be the last time they'd see her smile. A soft smile, not as bright as usual, but gentle enough that her friend remembered it vividly. He said she looked tired, the kind of tired you carry inside, hidden behind a calm face. A cafe worker said she walked out more hurried than usual, like something or someone was waiting outside. But they couldn't tell whether it was something good or something she feared. The door closed behind her, and from that moment, nothing was certain anymore. A nearby security camera caught her walking along the sidewalk, clutching a small bag to her chest. The night breeze ruffled her hair. The warm streetlights cast a soft glow on her small frame, creating an image that still haunts those who've seen it. There was a quiet loneliness around her, one no one had noticed before. A driver said he saw her standing beside a dark-colored car. No argument. But what he remembered most was how she looked down at her hands, then nodded. A small, almost defeated nod, like she was accepting something, or letting something go. He didn't know which. He only knew it didn't feel right. Neighbors shared a different piece of the puzzle. They saw her earlier that afternoon, standing in her yard, hand on her hair, deep in thought. When they greeted her, she smiled, but only for a second. A fragile smile, as if placed there to reassure others. They still remember her eyes. Eyes that seemed to ask for understanding, yet unable to say a word. All these scattered moments, when pieced together, created a portrait filled with emotion. A portrait not just seen with the eyes, but felt with the heart. It was the story of a woman walking toward some unseen threshold in her life. A line so thin, like morning mist, yet strong enough to make the whole world question everything later. What haunts people most is that final moment, when she was still here, still walking the familiar streets, still within sight of strangers who didn't realize they were witnessing something irreversible. If someone had looked a second longer, asked one more question, noticed the weight in her eyes, maybe things would have been different. But no one ever knows. And that was the moment she vanished like a thin trail of smoke, leaving behind a single unanswered question that still wakes people in the middle of the night. What did they miss? That morning began like any other in her family's small home. Her phone lay on the table silent, cold, no messages, no calls. No home late tonight like she always sent. At first, the family assumed she stayed over at a friend's house. She did that sometimes to avoid driving late. But as the sun rose higher and call after call went unanswered, a strange feeling crept in, a wordless dread only family can sense. It wasn't loud. It simply tightened around their chests, shortening their breath. Her mother was the first to speak. She softly called her daughter's name, as if the right tone would make her walk through the back door with her usual smile. But no reply. She called again. Still silence so heavy it chilled the room. By noon, worry had turned into panic. The family called everyone they could think of, friends, co-workers, neighbors. Every "I haven't seen her" pushed them deeper into fear. Voices grew faster, breaths shorter. A storm was forming inside the house. Finally, they went to the police. They had no choice left. And when they walked in, the officer behind the desk paused, not because of their words, but because of the mother's eyes. Eyes of someone who knew something was terribly wrong, yet prayed to be wrong. The police took the case immediately. An adult woman can be out of contact for a few hours, yes, but disappearing without her phone, leaving no trace, vanishing from public spaces, that was different. That was dangerous. The family sat in front of the officer's desk, trying to recall every detail. What she wore, how she felt that day, whether she said anything unusual. But the more they tried to remember, the more everything blurred under the weight of fear. A young officer sat beside them, speaking gently, steady. He said they weren't alone. They would check cameras, question witnesses, track every lead. The family listened, but their fear didn't fade. Not because they doubted the police, but because they understood a painful truth. Every passing minute could be the difference between hope and heartbreak. Patrol cars were dispatched. Calls were made. Her name appeared on the internal bulletin board. Officers moved quickly. A machine suddenly awakened. But for the family, everything felt painfully slow. They sat there, hearing footsteps in the hall, doors opening and closing, but unable to do anything to bring her home. That night, exhausted and trembling, they returned home. The living room light cast long shadows on their anxious faces. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. This night would feel longer than any night before it, and the terrible realization hit them. She wasn't simply out somewhere. She was gone, completely, without a trace. And from that moment, their lives entered a journey no one is ever prepared for. Just when the police thought every lead had dried up, an unexpected call came in. On the other end was an older man, voice raspy and trembling, as if something heavy had been sitting on his conscience. He said he had seen her that night, not long before she vanished. But what truly caught investigators' attention wasn't his voice. It was what he carried. A small, old-fashioned voice recorder. The kind people used years ago to save memories they feared they'd forget. His name was Harris, a retired factory worker living alone in a tiny apartment overlooking the street where the last camera footage caught her. He took nightly walks, always with that recorder, talking into it just to ease the loneliness. People said he was odd, a little withdrawn. That night, he walked past the quiet street just after dark. He saw her standing beside a dark-colored car, exactly as previous witnesses described. But he saw something no one else had. He heard her voice. Her tone wasn't loud or panicked. It was low, tight, like someone trying desperately to stay calm. Like someone speaking to a person she didn't want to see, yet couldn't avoid. Harris said she said something that still sent chills down his spine when he repeated it. "Please, don't do that again." Her voice trembled slightly, but she wasn't crying. The strangest part? Harris hadn't meant to overhear anything. He was simply passing by, and his recorder, already running because he always kept it on, captured everything. When he handed the device to police, his hands shook. Not from age, but from fear that he might have accidentally recorded the final moments of someone stepping into something far darker than he ever imagined. In the interrogation room, the officers pressed play. At first, only wind and Harris's footsteps. Then her voice soft, clear, as though she were standing right beside them. When Mr. Harris's recording was finally analyzed, the air inside the investigation room seemed to thicken. Everyone felt it. That subtle shift, as if they had stepped onto a fragile line between truth and something darker. And right at that moment, another clue surfaced. A clue clear enough to turn suspicion into the first real direction of the case. Police began tracing the dark-colored car several witnesses had mentioned. No readable license plate, no camera angle catching the driver's face. But there was one detail almost everyone had overlooked. On the rear windshield was a small decal, a logo from a local dance studio, the kind of sticker only people in the neighborhood would recognize. When investigators brought an enlarged photo of the decal to the studio where she used to practice every Tuesday night, the owner recognized it instantly. She mentioned that the victim had once talked about a man who often waited outside after class late at night. Someone she said was polite, but strange. Someone who made her uncomfortable, though she never told her friends clearly. His name was Mark, an appliance repairman living not far from the studio. He knew her from casual encounters around the neighborhood. Not a close friend, not a boyfriend, not a coworker, just someone familiar enough to wave at. But sometimes, it's those loose, seemingly harmless connections that become the most unsettling when you look back. Police went to Mark's house later that afternoon. The small home sat at the end of a quiet street, its backyard covered in dry leaves as if no one had swept it in weeks. When they knocked, Mark opened the door with just the right amount of surprise. Not too nervous, not too calm, that kind of controlled neutrality investigators always pay attention to. When asked about her, Mark claimed dryly that he barely knew her and hadn't seen her in weeks. But the detectives were not focused on his words. They were focused on his eyes, the way they flickered away the second they mentioned the night she disappeared, as if he were holding on to a truth he didn't want slipping out between his teeth. A young detective noticed Mark's shoes. Fresh mud. The kind found in the wooded area behind the neighborhood. Hardly anyone went back there, unless they had a reason. When questioned, Mark simply shrugged and said he had gone for a walk. But on the very night, a woman vanished. At the exact time he had no alibi. It wasn't enough. Police requested a warrant to search Mark's car. In the back seat, they found several long strands of hair matching her color. Under the floor mat, a small piece of fabric similar to what she had been wearing that night. Not enough to prove guilt, but enough to ignite a suspicion stronger than anything so far. When officers presented this to the family, they couldn't hide their emotion. Not relief, pain. Because a clearer suspect meant one thing. The possibility that something terrible had happened became even more real. Hope was still there, but stretched so thin that one more truth might snap it entirely. To the police, Mark was just the first suspect. To the family, he became the embodiment of their worst question. If she did meet him that night, Did she run? Did she try to call for help? Could they have saved her? If someone had found this sooner. In that moment, everyone understood. This was no longer just a missing person case. It had become a race against time. And in races like this, being just a few hours late could send everything into a place no one dared imagine. When Mark became the first suspect, investigators believed they were on the right path. Until another man, Welch, walked into the station and shattered that direction completely. Welch looked so ordinary that no one would ever think he could sway an entire investigation. But that plainness made his words even harder to judge. He appeared on a rainy afternoon when the sky hung low and gray, pressing down on the city like a heavy blanket. He walked in with urgency, not the urgency of a guilty man, but the urgency of someone carrying a secret too heavy to keep inside. He claimed he had seen her that night. And what he said made every detective in the room freeze. Welch insisted she wasn't with a man. She was walking alone, her coat pulled tight, her steps faster than normal, as if someone was following her, a presence Welch couldn't see. He said she kept glancing over her shoulder. She didn't speak. Then she turned into a narrow alley near the pharmacy, a place almost deserted after 8 o'clock, and she never came back out. His words tore through every theory the police had built. If she had been alone, what was on Mr. Harris's recording? Where did the dark car come from? And why did she look frightened to other witnesses? There couldn't be two truths about the same moment. What made Welch's testimony even more unsettling was his calmness. No hesitation, no fear. He spoke with the certainty of someone who truly believed he had seen a woman in fear. Police checked every camera in the area. Nothing. Everything Welch said evaporated the moment they tried to verify it. But instead of doubting himself, he insisted the cameras had missed her, that she was standing in the blind spot, that what he saw was real. His confidence pushed the investigation off course. Some detectives began questioning earlier evidence. Was the dark car actually involved? Did Mr. Harris hear correctly? Was the whole neighborhood letting fear distort what they believed they saw? Her family listened to Welch's testimony with hearts tightening in confusion. They didn't know who to believe. Every version painted a different picture of her last moments. And painfully, every version hinted at a different kind of fear. If she was alone, what was she running from? Who was she trying to escape? And why did no one else see it? But Welch was not spotless. His records showed a few odd incidents. Small lies without reason. Times he appeared in places he shouldn't be. Not a criminal, but not entirely transparent. The lead detective described Welch as the kind of man who made you unsure whether to trust him or doubt him. His words were never fully wrong, never fully right, always somewhere in between, as if he stood on the thin line between truth and fiction, and only he knew which parts belonged to which side. The investigation stalled. Welch couldn't prove his story, but police also couldn't prove he lied. Meanwhile, time kept slipping away, and every hour lost was an hour hope faded. Welch's testimony swept through the case like a cold wind. And in cases like these, a wrong turn doesn't just waste time. It can take away the last chance to save someone. 40 years passed, and the case settled over the town like a layer of dust no one dared brush away. But for the family, time didn't heal anything. It only pressed the wound deeper. Every night, they kept the porch light on, a wordless message to the dark, hoping that if she wandered somewhere out there, she might find her way home. Police departments changed over decades. Yet her file always stayed in the drawer everyone hesitated to reopen. Old clues were revisited until hope itself felt worn thin. Young detectives came in believing they could make a difference, only to learn the same quiet sighs as those before them. Just a silence so cruel, it made them wonder if justice was ever meant for those who waited the longest. Looking back, people realized a disappearance doesn't take just one person. It shakes an entire community awake, forcing everyone to face fears they thought they had buried beneath routine and safety. This case reminded us that tragedy often begins with the smallest things: a missed call, a sudden change in habit, a moment we brush off as nothing. It taught us that indifference can cut sharper than crime itself, because if just one person, only one, had noticed a little more, maybe everything would have been different. In the echo of this case, people learn to slow down, to pay attention, to ask each other more often if they're okay. And no matter how late justice arrives, we must keep searching, because truth doesn't just close a file, it gives a family back the chance to finally breathe after decades of living in the shadow of hope.